Welcome to the Long Thread podcast about spinning, stitching, and weaving by hand. The podcast is presented by Long Thread Media, publishers of Spin-Off, Handwoven, Piecework, and Little Looms magazines. Find us online at longthreadmedia.com. Trinway Silks is where weavers, spinners, knitters, and stitchers find the silk they love. Select from the largest variety of silk spinning fibers, silk yarn, and silk threads and ribbons at trinwaysilks.com. You'll discover a rainbow of colors thoughtfully hand-dyed in Colorado. Love natural? Trinway's array of wild silks provide choices beyond white. If you love silk, you'll love Trinway Silks, where superior quality and customer service are guaranteed.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and I've worked at the Yarn Barn of Kansas for over 30 years. If you've called to place an order or ask a question about weaving, you've probably talked with me. Here at the Yarn Barn, we're all weavers, so we can answer questions about weaving techniques and make product recommendations. Visit yarnbarn-ks.com, call 800-468-0035, or check out our tutorials on YouTube. We'd love to help you.
I'm your host, Long Thread Media co-founder Ann Merrow. Barry Schacht founded Schacht Spindle Company in 1969. Jane Patrick, his wife, is a teacher and author who was the editor of Handwoven magazine before joining Schacht Spindle Company. So Barry and Jane, thanks so much for having me.
So glad that you came up.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to start by talking about Schacht Spindle Company because Schacht Spindle Company is 56 years old.
Correct.
Right? And has had a big change recently. But you guys are here as a dynamic duo. Not only have you both been guiding Schacht Spindle Company for 40 years together, but Jane, you were the editor of Handwoven. You've taught numerous weaving classes, really kind of pioneered, I think, inkle weaving, small loom weaving, just been a resource for that and a champion for that, and have done a number of videos. So we're going to be talking about Schacht Spindle Company, but this is really kind of about the two of you. Barry, can you tell me a little bit about how Schacht Spindle Company came to be?
Sure. When I first came to Boulder, I came to visit my brother, and that was 56 years ago, and he still says, and he's still here, I was just stopping in. And I had worked at the university, and no, I wasn't a professor. I was on the grounds crew. And after a while, that didn't work out so well. I got fired for mowing a peace symbol into the front lawn of the student union.
It was 1969.
Yeah, and I wasn't as political as that act seemed. I had already served in the Air Force Reserve, so I wasn't like totally anti-military, and I had gained a lot of interesting things while in the military. But after getting fired, we had no money, and my brother's girlfriend wanted to learn how to spin yarn. She was part of that great Back to the Earth movement. So we had heard about a woman up in Loveland, Colorado. Turned out it was Louise Green, and she had been raising sheep and teaching spinning. So there were four of us hippies. I got in a truck with three dogs, and we went up to visit Louise Green. We ended up at the wrong Greens Ranch in Loveland. We opened the doors, the dogs came out, and fortunately, the owners of that ranch weren't home because pretty soon all their sheep were on top of the sheds, and they would have shot us.
Oh, no.
So we put the dogs back in and found Louise Green. And she showed the girlfriend how to spin on a drop spindle. And then while Louise was watching her, she kind of came over to me and she said, you hippies got some spare time. You think you could make these spindles for me? And I said, sure. How many? How much? Having just been fired, I had no money. And she said, $1 a piece, 200. And I thought, wow, that's going to be great income. So we found out where these spindles came from, and one part of it was a doorknob, and one part of it was a dowel. So my brother still was in school, so we went back to the school, the art school. They had a great wood shop. We thought we could use the drill press there. We drilled out these doorknobs and put together 200 spindles. Well, turns out that those doorknobs were the key to the naming of our company. I found out where they were made, somewhere up in Michigan, Waddell Manufacturing Company. And I called them to order the knobs, and they said, "Who are these for?" And instantly I thought, whoa, if I don't have a company name, I'm not going to get wholesale. So I said, Schacht Spindle Company. With that, the name of the company was born, and it's kept up no matter what we've made. And people aren't sure what that means, except if they're weaving and spinning people, then they know.
Mm-hmm.
So the name was born. We painted a little green tree on each one of the spindles. Louise didn't ask for that, but when we brought them back, she was delighted. And at the time, my brother's girlfriend wanted to learn also how to weave. So my brother made her a little loom out of Nelza Namorowski's Learning to Weave, step-by-step weaving. And I thought, oh, I could improve on that. So we made a little improvement. Louise looked at it, and even though it was worse than a pile of wood, she said, that's a good idea. And so we improved on that and started making our looms from that point on.
You can spin yarn with something so very simple, and yet you've taken it so much farther and created all of these finely wrought. Not to say that your doorknob and dowel was not finely wrought, but I would say that it's probably not anywhere near what you have been producing in wheels and looms for the past 50 years. I hope that doesn't cause offense, Barry.
Right. Well, if we go into the history of spinning and weaving,
Mm-hmm.
that spindle's thousands of years old. And then we started to invent other things. We got pretty much as far as the year 1550 AD, where the spinning wheel achieved pretty much its earliest inventions, which it has hardly changed since. Different kind of bodies around the same motor drive, which was a wheel on a crank. And our weaving looms are probably really more back in the 1700s.
Mm-hmm.
And so the history is there. We've done a lot of shape, a lot of construction, and I'd say sophisticated in woodworking joinery to create what we think are pretty good functioning, well-made products.
But there has been something at every turn where you've said, I think I could do this a little bit better.
Yeah. How about today on my desk? I have two things that I have to improve on. And, it'll take a little while, but we'll have some improvements for one of our spinning wheels coming up pretty soon.
Oh, now I'm excited. But so do you think of yourself as an engineer or a designer or a businessman or?
Well, I think there's a little bit of each one of those things, but mostly I like the aesthetic and parts of design. I like the creation, the purchasing, the buying, the making of things that fit together, always between the rock and the hard place when you're putting more than two pieces together. And I love the challenge of creating and advertising, marketing, and of course, running a business. It all kind of melds into the idea of it. It all goes together to create something that one can make a living from.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of where creativity comes from, is responding to constraints. And so running up against something difficult pushes you to, innovate something that you wouldn't have done before that also has these sort of side benefits. So I'm curious, what do you think are the tweaks or changes that you're most excited about?
In product?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's always been, kind of holding true to a particular aesthetic. And the way that there's a lot of Bauhaus form follows function. I think you kind of develop a particular form, but it isn't really one of the constraints that you really rely on. Because I think as we developed our product line, we went from hardwood exclusive, and then we found a lot of freedom in designing using plywoods. And that allowed us to incorporate a lot more of a different aesthetic. And then to build on that and take 10 separate pieces and make each one of those agree with the aesthetic of, say, your beginning part has been, for me, the most exciting part of the design.
Yes, that sort of backward compatibility, because you can get parts for older Schacht wheels and looms, and these elements work with what's come before and also what's come now. When I was thinking about, for example, there's just little tweaks here and there, like you can put in a pin that will hold the beater and the reed of a baby wolf while you thread it. Right? Is that?
Yeah. And before we did that, maybe somebody else did it, but most people tied 2 loops of yarn or string to the beater going in one direction to the castle and then back to the front so it would stabilize it. We just thought we'd put a little piece of hardware in there to make it a simpler thing.
Yeah, just a little pin. And when I was speaking with Madeline Vanderhoot recently, she talked about how, well, there's a particular kind of warping that's just so much easier because on the Schacht looms, you can take off the back beam. And so something that would be much more difficult on a different loom, well, you just scoot right up.
Right. Well, actually, we were late to come up with that style or that enhancement. Other people had done it before. And actually, some people just folded the whole back beam down to the ground. And then they put a chair inside the loom. So those are things that have been done. And, I can't claim any specialty there, but it was a good feature, certainly.
Yeah, makes it very kind of user-friendly. And now a word from our sponsors. Appalachian Baby Design offers sustainably sourced yarns, kits, and patterns for crafting heirloom-quality gifts for the family. Their U.S. organic cotton and Shanico sportweight wool are soft, resilient, and washable, perfect for creating lasting pieces. Whether knitting, crocheting, or weaving, for beautiful creations that will be cherished for generations, start with AppalachianBaby.com. Eucalan is your go-to delicate wash for the fibers you love. Whether you're blocking a shawl, freshening up handspun, or preserving a vintage knit, Eucalan's no-rinse formula with lanolin keeps your work clean, soft, and cared for. Biodegradable, gentle, and available in 5 lovely scents because your craftsmanship deserves the best. Learn more at eucalan.com. And now back to the show. As we're sitting here in your office and your warehouse, folks may hear in the background that there is a little bit, it's hopefully, it's not, you can't hear it very much, but you can hear a little bit of air tools and things like that because you are here in a working factory. It's not like all of that woodworking and building and manufacturing is somewhere off down the road. You're here every day with the folks who are making your equipment.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And besides each individual area having well-versed managers, I get to stroll around every once in a while. Sometimes it's not as wonderful for other people, but I really like to follow what's going on, how things are being done, and focus on the efficiency of that.
Because I think that's one of the interesting things about being do you think of Schacht as being a small business?
Yes, it's a tiny business. It's a tiny business in a very small industry. Because
people who are weavers probably think of Schacht as being very big because you can weave on one of those, there are many people who have spent their entire weaving careers working on one of these pieces of equipment, but then it's created by a pretty small group of people, some of whom have been here their entire careers.
Yeah. It's always interesting. People come to visit, and besides all the women who've been weavers for long times wanting to give me a hug, I find that they're surprised both ways. Some people think how small it is, and then I'd say overall people say, oh, I thought it was operated out of a garage.
Wow.
But, I think in the world of weaving, there are just a few reasonably sized companies, maybe 5 in the entire world.
And when you make equipment that really lasts a long time, it's a great compliment that these things last forever. But continuing a business when you're kind of competing with your past self, is that a challenge?
Oh, it's more of a challenge now as a large number of people who started weaving in the early 70s are retiring, or they're sometimes moving into other types of situations. They have to reduce the equipment they have. Their skill level isn't as high. So it brings a lot of used equipment to the market. So fortunately for those people who acquire that, we can pretty much service it. but it also is a very expensive part of our customer service to outfit and to repair old looms that have been in existence for as long as 45 to 50 years.
Sure.
And it's an issue that we and every other loom maker has to address in the current marketplace.
And there's a lot of things that we can supply, but we can't supply everything. For example, when we first made the floor loom, it was 42 inches wide. And I suppose in the past 5 years, we stopped servicing that width of loom. Anything that goes crosswise is fine, but like you can't get a 42-inch harness anymore or a 4-liter kit because the demand isn't there. And then it's just very costly for us to take and especially make a special size.
Fortunately, since most of our product is made out of wood, people can go to a local woodworker and have almost every part duplicated.
If you can find a local woodworker.
Right.
There are fewer loom manufacturers than there used to be in all kinds of general hand making. So, yeah. But so Jane, you obviously were not present at you were not the girlfriend.
No, was I still in kindergarten? No.
So
she was that junior high school girl in Nebraska as I drove across country in my hippie van.
No, let's see. Barry moved to Boulder in 1969. I moved here in 76. And I had first woven when I was an exchange student in Iceland in 1971. But I really didn't really know how to weave. I wove when I was in Iceland. So when I came to Boulder, I really wanted to really learn how to weave. And Deborah Chandler was my teacher. So Deborah Chandler's mother is Louise Green. So there's like all this connection. So Debbie was my weaving teacher, and I hung out at the weaving shop a lot in Boulder, and that's where Barry and I met. But I didn't start working at Schacht at that time. I guess it was 79, 80, something like that. I went and worked at Interweave. I called up Linda and asked for an interview, and Debbie had told me there was a shipping job at Interweave. And so I called Linda, and she interviewed me. I was never the shipper at Interweave, but she hired me to be her assistant. And then that sounded like a good idea. So I did a readership survey, and sent it out. And then that's when Barry and I went on our bike trip. And so as the survey we were waiting for the results to come in, we were biking, and then I came back and I tabulated it, and we produced a document from that survey. And then I guess Linda decided I was worthy, and I stayed at Interweave.
How long did you stay at Interweave?
I was there, I think, 12 years.
Wow. Linda had a string of illustrious assistants. She had a good eye for, I don't know what you'll do, but you'll do something.
Well, that was kind of like, she kept giving me editorial work, and I was a cultural anthropology major, and that's really a good background for editorial work because it's organizing data, information, and that's what editing's about. So I was well suited for that, and I loved it.
Do you remember what the survey, do you remember anything surprising from that survey?
Well, what's not surprising is the demographics pretty much the same.
Interesting. Pretty much all, 60.
Yeah.
Reasonably, it is interesting. Fortunately, there are people turning 60 every day.
Right. And 1 million women are retiring every year. So that's part of our market.
Yeah. So speaking of Interweave, Barry, Linda has told me about how, she started Interweave in 1975, but then the first issue of Handwoven was in 1979. And she approached you and said, I'm thinking about starting a weaving magazine with projects. What do you think?
Well, okay. The story is that Halcyon Champ, who had her retail weaving shop in Denver at the time, and I had become friends, and we got together, and we thought that really the more important thing was to give guidance to people to learn weaving technique, but we also thought it was okay for them to have patterns. And we called Linda up, and she came up to our factory, and Hector and Halcyon came to the factory, and we sat around and gave her kind of our input. And, we didn't know what was going to happen, but lo and behold, a year later, Linda comes out with the first issue of Handwoven, and it was spectacular. And it began to grow in size and was, I say, extremely responsible for the growth of hand weaving and the hand weavers. And our market grew substantially after that. But it was Linda's genius to take that advice, think about it, and then almost in a surprise way, a year later, come up with that magazine. And ever since that time, the industry grew. And, it kept growing quite substantially. And I say it began to calm down in the 80s, and then it grew again. And it's been up and down over all of these many years.
And even though the demographics maybe haven't changed, I think there are differences in how people learn to weave. My impression is that weaving is less of a back to the earth sort of a craft than it was when you started. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I used to love that back to the earth movement. In fact, when we first started making our looms, we also organized classes. And that was one of the key ingredients of selling looms that we made. We were teaching, not ourselves personally, but we organized through community free schools in Boulder and Denver.
Wow.
Hundreds of people took the class on our initial tapestry loom. And my brother and another friend of ours, Bert, would go and help that first night of warping because, as you know, warping always takes up a lot of time. Well, we were there to help, but we were also there looking for girlfriends,
You were before your time, and in this case.
Right. And then, it turns out, of course, that many years later, that's where I met my first girlfriend, who then became my wife, Jane.
And I think weavers have a funny relationship with having projects or patterns. There's always some people who feel like it's not really weaverly, that one should make things up entirely themselves.
Well, I always find that interesting because knitters don't have problems with a knitting pattern. I just don't see the difference. And, my feeling is whatever gives you joy, do it. And the thing that a pattern does is it guarantees or almost guarantees success. So you spend all that time making something, and sometimes people don't have a lot of time to do the sampling and figuring out. Then you have a successful, great project.
And then you can take what you learned and do something next, but at least you're not stumbling around in the dark for.
Yeah, I think it keeps people weaving.
And you are the author of several books on weaving.
Correct.
So, and I one of the things I think is very interesting is that you have certainly woven a great variety of complexities, et cetera. But my impression is that all of your books have had to do with very simple looms. Is that right?
Right. The first book, ironically, didn't even involve a loom hardly. Time to Weave. And I think Linda came to me with that idea. And I that was the best. That was so much fun making a book of weaving that didn't use a loom. There is a little frame loom in there for one project, but mostly what was interesting was how much research involved and ancient techniques that found their way into that book. So that was the first book. And then the other 3 books have been rigid-heddle books. And I think I got involved with rigid-heddle early because someone asked me to teach her classes at Boulder Parks and Recs. I didn't even know what a rigid-heddle loom was hardly. And I said, yes. So I kind of had to learn to weave the rigid-heddle loom when I was teaching the class. And I thought it was just a really good, simple way for people to learn to weave. So then I really promoted that through the magazine. And back then, people would say, well, that's not real weaving. And I just, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter what you weave on. It's going to be fabric. And I was lucky that Betty Davenport was one of my contributors, and she was a terrific designer. And so that, I think, presented rigid-heddle as really a viable alternative for people to make really cool stuff.
And then so one of the books that you wrote is really kind of foundational, I think, for a lot of rigid-heddle weavers to design, actually, which is the
Weaver's Idea book.
Right.
It's been very successful. It's still in print, actually. The other 3 books you can get digitally.
Yeah. And the other 3 books are,
there's Time to Weave, and there's Woven Scarves, and there's Simple Woven Garments. Yeah.
So in the last 2 are you follow the directions and you can make the thing.
Correct.
But the Weaver's Idea book is kind of more in that transition. You can make this pattern that you see, but you would put it on something else. You would design around it.
Right. Every chapter has an actual project, but it's more like how you learn finger technique, for example, and then there'll be a catalog of a variety of techniques. So in a way, it's a combination book. There's teaching technique, but there's also a lot of patterns in it.
But you didn't start off as a teacher, and yet a lot of your work has been teaching, in person and also through video.
That's correct. I think if you're an editor and writer, you learn how to teach because it has to be clear. And I think those 2, teaching and writing, go together.
Boy, I find teaching to be exhausting. There are folks who are teachers and they kind of draw that energy. And the thing I like about editing is that you can always fix it afterward, which is not the case in weaving.
Well, I love having students in the classroom, and I love, working with people that learn in different ways because, and especially adults who might not have a confidence in learning. They really can get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people who are picking things up as adults, it is something new. And as an adult, you don't necessarily try something that you don't know how to do that is hard, as part of your daily life.
Right. But, I say to my students, I'll repeat stuff as many times as you need me to repeat it, and I'll do it in different ways. It doesn't matter. That's what I'm here for.
Right.
So I really try, because I think sometimes people are like, I'm the only one that's not getting it. Well, that's probably not true.
It's probably not true. Yeah. We talked about the spindles, and we've been since then talking mostly about weaving, but, the spinning element of Schacht Spindle Company, the spinning wheel aspect, I think that there are a lot of weavers who probably don't think about the spinning side, and there's a lot of spinners who might not think that much about the weaving side. But spinning is just kind of an essential part of the company.
Right. Well, it took us a long time to go from the spindle to the spinning wheel. But I started working on that, and I always felt I needed to have something unique. And the most unique element of our spinning wheel, the first spinning wheel, was the fact that it had a single front leg where most spinning wheels had a single back leg. Then the treadle moved freely. So designing that where the treadle went around the front leg was, I'd say, it was unique in my mind. It may have been done because spinning wheels have been made for 500 years. Maybe somebody did that. And then as I developed it, I would actually rely on people who knew more about spinning and function. One of those people was Alden Amos, who was famous in the industry for his knowledge, and he was also an incredible character.
Yes.
But I met him and visited with him, and then going back and forth and neglecting things that he said and taking into account things that he said, we produced a really interesting spinning wheel. And then naming has always been one of my things. And I really feel names, we could talk about names for all the products, and if you want, we can give a little history of those. But
I love that.
For the spinning wheel in particular, I thought it had great features. So I went back in my mind, and I don't know why, but I focused on motorcycles. And then I remembered there was this great British motorcycle called the Matchless. It started being built in, and people might question, a British machine that was matchless. Well, they called it the Matchless. So I thought, well, this spinning wheel is pretty much approximating that. So we dubbed it the Matchless. Well, it took more than 20 years for anybody else in the world to call it the matchless because we only had one spinning wheel and it became the Schacht.
Yes.
And then when we created our second spinning wheel, and I think that was the Ladybug,
Yeah.
we finally had another name, and everybody, to differentiate, started to focus on or call the original the matchless.
Yeah.
So we actually had to wait 20 years for my great idea of a name to become popular.
And, I think if you look through back issues of Spin-Off magazine, one of my favorite things is the ads, because the matchless, there's a picture of you with a helmet on. Because can you tell why that was?
Oh, yeah. That had a lot to do with Alden Amos also, because he really discouraged the idea of double treadle. And double treadle was, it had been there, but it got picked up again sometime in the 90s, and people were doing it. And we created one, everybody else did. And he was pretty negative about, why do you have to have that? And it had certain restrictions. And he was right about some of that. But I thought, well, he's a friend. I'm going to counter what he says. So I put a bicycle handlebar on the spinning wheel, and I put my helmet on. And the caption was, Barry Schacht has pedaled his double treadle spinning wheel around the world. So of course, pedaled meant two things.
Right.
So, he never commented back, but he probably, grumbled. Somewhere back in
rolled his eyes.
Right, in the gold country. But, I try to have some humor in the business. Sometimes it falls on welcoming ears, other times maybe not.
Well, and just as an aside, I think, cycling is certainly something that you love and are passionate about. And you actually have a separate business in bicycle accessories.
Right. Well, just as I was meeting Jane, I started to bicycle again. And I, for some reason, had grown up in a small town. I was in Boulder. There was a lot of traffic. So I said, I need a mirror. So I didn't go out and buy a mirror. I thought, I'm going to create a mirror that satisfies all the requirements of the three hand positions on a racing or drop style handlebar. And I found a way to do it, and I got a patent on it, the only patent I've ever had. Patents on textile equipment are very hard to find. And we started a company based on that one product. And within a year, we were one of the most popular companies on, North America and Europe, selling one product. And here it is now, 45 years later, we still are in that business, but we're selling mirrors and we're selling bells. And again, the names were important. Miracle Mirrors and Incredible Bells, both are registered trademarks. And we sell to every major distributor in the United States and Canada.
Wow. And just going back to the Handwoven and Spin-Off ads, there was also one where the two of you were walking your sidekick.
Oh, yeah. Well, what was interesting, we had a wonderful photographer, Michael Lichter. And we would go to his studio ever since Nora was 3. At the end of a photo shoot, he would say, let me take a personal picture. So it happened at that particular time for that product, he wanted to take a personal picture of Barry and Jane. And I thought, oh, wait a minute. We've got a carrying strap. Let's make this thing look like a little dog. And we're walking along. So it was fun. Again, fun. And Michael himself was the foremost motorcycle photographer in the world.
Funny.
And he still is doing that. In fact, we saw him 2 nights ago. He's off to the Sturgis show where he has an exclusive gallery devoted to him. And he's going to be doing a show of 120 photos of all sorts of motorcycles and people on those motorcycles. If you're in that industry, you kind of get the drift of what I'm saying.
If I were quicker, I would make some comment about all the various kinds of wheels here. You have a spinning wheel and a bicycle wheel and a motorcycle wheel, and it all goes around. I'm sure it'll come to me, tomorrow or the next day.
Well, you can edit it in.
Yeah.
It's not only editing things out, because some of, I have been very well behaved today, but you may need at some point in this interview to find something that needs to be edited out.
Probably something silly I've said, but you have to keep working, Barry. I haven't found anything yet. You have to try harder. But the Sidekick was a pretty innovative spinning wheel where the spinning wheel is rotated 90 degrees. So, and it's not the only one in the world, but it's certainly the only contemporary one that I know of.
Yeah, and it had a lot of things to do with the bicycle. It pedals or treadles like a bicycle.
Mm-hmm.
The wheel is facing you.
Mm-hmm.
The drive train or pulley has to make a right angle. It folds up. It uses bicycle quick releases to make the mechanisms loose so you can fold them. Mm-hmm. So it really had
tensioner.
Tensioner. It had a lot to do with bicycles.
So tell me about the Ladybug, because Ladybug is just cute.
Well, I can take credit for the Ladybug.
Yeah, Jane has got this one down. She named a product.
Well, okay, so I thought we needed another wheel that was more entry level, because the matchless it's a premium product.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my starting point. And then I made a whole list of stuff. Like, it should be this, it should be that, it should have this, it should be cute. And that's where I even think I came up with the name Ladybug even before they started designing it, because I was trying to create an image of a product for them. And so then that's when you see the treadles are kind of like a wing. And then on every one, this wasn't my idea. This was probably Barry's idea, to put a little ladybug on every single wheel, and it's never in the same place. So the people that are building that wheel have fun. They decide where that's going to go.
It's kind of like a ladybug in a garden. You never know where it is, but it could appear. So that was the idea.
And then the wheel is red, ladybug again.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've seen in matchless wheels and also on my baby wolf, which Linda Ligon passed on to me, is that they all have a birth date. They all have
serial number.
The serial number.
Oh, yes.
Maggie Casey calls it a birth date.
Uh-huh.
That's my wheel's birthday.
Right.
So,
well, that's true.
I just got one of those matchless wheels back. That was 1989, I think, third year. And it happened to come from a friend in Florida. He's not a spinner, but it had deteriorated from non-use. But he liked it as a sculpture in his house because nobody knows what it is. His friends group does not know about spinning and weaving. So it came back in here, and our current wheel maker was delighted because he made it look perfect again.
Mm.
So he put it together, and we're just sending it back today with 2 new bobbins, because the bobbins he sent back had been crushed and sat on and everything. But it's going to be able to be used again for another 30, 40 years.
Yeah, it's funny. You don't think of wheels deteriorating from lack of use. But your neglected wheel, your neglected loom.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the loom that I had that I brought back, I think the frame had warped. And so it didn't sink down again when you took your foot off the treadle.
Right.
Yeah. It was in a video with Jennifer Moore, her first double weave video. And every once in a while, she would casually rest her hand on the castle. And it turns out that was to push the frame back down. But I brought it back and you guys fixed it up for me. So.
Yeah, it's much easier when people are local, because the shipping expense for moving product around is just outrageous these days.
Yeah. Well, and so it probably helped a lot that you were in this hotbed of weaving. You had, Halcyon Yarns and Deborah Chandler and Handwoven. Do you feel like Boulder was kind of a nexus of weaving back then?
Absolutely. In fact, one of the most interesting origin stories, I got into doing these few little looms, and then I met one of the original weavers in Boulder, and she had looms in her house. Can't recall her name right now, but one of the few people that I've met in my life that's shorter than me. And she did not teach people how to warp because she was from the old country, and she felt there should be a master-student relationship So she warped all the looms and never taught people to weave. Well,
And to work.
to warp, but to weave. What eventually happened was some of her students, who turned out to be some of the greats, Carol Strickler, Clotilde Barrett, a lot of these Boulder weavers, didn't think to do it that way. So they broke off and they started not only teaching other people, but they also were, editors. They wrote books.
Right.
And they eventually built the Hand Weavers Guild up to the point when I appeared, there were already maybe 20, 30 people. And then back in, say, even 15, 20 years ago, there were 400 members of the guild. So it is and was a hotbed of weavers in this area. And Colorado, even today, has guilds, from the north to the south, from the east to the west. So it is a weaving center. And of course, that influenced us quite a bit.
Yeah. So I want to ask you on the other end of the spectrum about another great name and a very simple loom, which is the Zoom loom. People had wanted for years, these weavettes that were so popular, and they would come and go, but the Zoom loom has caught on and I think really sparked interest in pin loom weaving that's been sustained for such a long time.
Right. Well, the original pin loom of the Weave It was invented by a guy, I think he was in Connecticut in 1937. And he did get a patent at that point. And then since that time, it's the unique configuration of the pins and the technique of the layers that creates the finished product. And it's kind of a cohesive product, doesn't fall apart. Then it'd been made by many, many people over the years. And not only people who produced it, but people who felt that they wanted to make one-offs and then 10-off and that kind of thing. The idea for our pin loom actually came to us from John Malarkey. And he had the idea that really made it a better product. It had not really improved over a wood frame made with 4 pieces of wood until John came along and he had the idea of making a sloping side so that when the needle went across, it moved smoothly. You weren't jabbing it into things, and a couple of other features that he designed. And then we said, that's great. So we made an arrangement with him where we would get the injection molded parts made. We got the pins made, which was the first time we ever ordered 1 million of something. We ordered these little metal pins from a company in New England, which is famous for the steel business, even from bullets to firearms and from heddles to heddle bars. That steel industry grew up in the Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island area. So it's an American company that does that. The plastic parts are injection molded in Longmont, Colorado. And then we had to come up with a neat little box.
Yes.
Very
cute.
To make it work.
Yeah.
The needles actually do come from China.
But I think it's pretty remarkable. I don't know that people would know that the plastic molded is from, what is that, 15 miles away from the office?
Yeah.
Longmont?
Well, the thing about the plastic also, they really look at it, and it just looks like this plastic, but inside that plastic is a lot of structure. Because if you didn't have the structure in there, first you got to put the pins in, and then there's other kind of like honeycombing inside there that keeps it stable. So when you're holding it, it doesn't squish down. And then this is the part I love, is it's smooth on the top and it has a texture on the bottom. So it's very pleasing, I think, to hold.
Do you remember where the name came from? Did we create that? You did.
Yeah, I think
Jane came up with Zoom Loom.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Michael Signorella, our designer, made the box. The box, it's been around for quite a while, but I think it's still fresh.
You did the weaving on it, right?
I don't even remember.
Those look to me like Jane colors.
Yeah.
Probably. Yeah.
One of the things that, in the beginning, the volumes were really high. We used to have like circle of people putting the pins in because they're all put in by hand.
Really?
But we used to have like 4, 5, 6 people putting pins in and racing. And some of the Hmong women that worked for us, I think, were the fastest because Jane would go out and compete with them, but they were better at doing that little detail work. So, but today we have a little bit more automation added to that, but it's still pretty much, shall we say, hand loaded every pin.
They're still putting the pins in by hand.
And Gabby Van Tassel, I spoke with Gabby Van Tassel of Turtle Looms a while ago, and she gives you guys a lot of credit for encouraging her to make her kind of unusual hexagonal and pentagonal shaped looms. But she talks about how she's also making them entirely by hand. So I'm a little surprised that even with the injection molded aspect, that you still have a handmade part to it.
Right. Well, I did go to a robotics show in Chicago. And the secret with robotics is always not that it can't do it, but there are little things at the ends, like our fingers. You need things that can present the pin individually to little fingers. And the problem could be solved, but probably for a couple $100,000. So the value against the volume isn't really there unless you can have that volume. And that would mean you would have to go out and be selling your version to one of the mass retailers in the craft industry. And our volumes are high, but they're not the kind of volumes that those people use.
Right. So speaking of the weaving that I think of as kind of being Jane's, that it looks like Jane, it has a sort of a colorful textural element to it. And I was curious about your weaving style. And I wonder whether having a background as a spinner also affects how you design in your weaving, because I think that a lot of people are using a lot of cotton now, and I see you using, wool and knitting yarns and going for that sort of texture.
Well, I think especially for the woven scarf book, that book was really designed for the knitting world. That was the idea, because at that time we were going to the TNNA show. We were promoting the Cricut loom to the knitting market, and we were seeing great success there. And part of it, was our education, but also there was no books that were using the yarns that the shops were carrying. So I partnered with Stephanie Flynn on that book, and Stephanie is a great designer, and that was really fun to work on that. So that really was, I think, informed my design for that book, was just because we were trying to use those kinds of yarns. And I do use a lot of wool in my beginning classes because that's easiest, most forgiving yarn for people to learn with. They're going to have fewer tension problems if they're going to put wool as their first work. I really like pearl cotton a lot. I'd say in my pattern book, in Weaver's Idea book, I use a lot of pearl cotton in there.
Yeah. And I noticed downstairs in the showroom area, you have a lot of knitting yarns and spinning fibers. So there's kind of a range of different, like I don't see a whole bunch of cones downstairs necessarily, right?
No, because I'm looking for that. I want to have pearl cotton in a 4-ounce cone, but it's not really something you find right now because we don't want to wind off yarn, because we want to sell it on the website and just have people come in and pick it up. So having pound cones isn't going to work in this environment.
We've been talking about books as well, and every time I come here, I am astonished at the number of books on the shelf. And there are not that many bookstores anymore. There are not, at least in Boulder, our beloved Shuttle Spindles and Skeins, which used to have a pretty incredible book selection, is not around anymore. So the number of weaving and spinning and textile books that you have on your shelves that you offer is really striking.
Well, I feel like I want to have a lot more than I have. I feel like we're not seeing a lot of books published. Like there are some books, but I wouldn't say there's books like Peter Collingwood's book or Debbie's book, Deborah Chandler's book, or Carol Strickler's book. We're not seeing that kind of book. We're seeing maybe more like a weave structure book like Shadow Weave or things like that. And that's fine. I would like to see more variety in the kind of books that are available. we do sell a lot of books
Mm-hmm.
because, especially to our dealers, they don't have a lot of other places that they can buy books from.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been we started as a service to our dealers
Mm-hmm.
because books help educate their customer. So it's something that I think shops want to offer. And I think craftspeople have a more tendency to want to have a book beside them than to have it digitally.
Paper as a textile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you've had a relationship with, 55 years of different dealers. There must have been a lot of changes, but can you tell me a little bit about having relationships with weaving stores all around the world? Barry, I know that supporting dealers and working with dealers was something that was always really important to you.
Well, when we first started in business, I think one of the things we did was extremely meaningful. And there were a few loom companies at the time, and there were very few dealers. And as the dealer network grew, one of the things that we felt was really important was that they get enough of a markup so they can make money on the sale. So having grown up in retail, one of the things I knew was that there had to be a certain amount of margin for a retail shop to exist. And when we first got into the business, the loom companies that were there were giving a dealer a 10% discount, maybe a 25% discount. And nobody was really inventorying things. Maybe one company in New York that sold a lot to schools had a significant inventory of one loom company. So we got in and we decided we're going to give a 40% discount. Well, it was a shock. And eventually, almost everybody in the industry went along, and pretty soon 35 to 40% were normal discounts. And the dealers could then build their inventory and keep it in stock. And back in the early 70s and 80s, that was true. But then it's changed again, and fewer dealers are really keeping inventory. So two things have happened. Some companies have changed and get variable discounts based on volume. Some people have continued doing the same discounting for dealers, but also are taking on more of their own sales, which is really the trend in all businesses today. You can even buy Levi's from Levi's Direct.
Mm-hmm.
So, having company website, company retail is a benefit to the company, but it also puts the company in closer contact for customer service with the end user.
Mm-hmm.
And that has, I think, been one of the avenues of success for all businesses and important in our business as well.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that's happened is there's fewer shops.
Right.
And it's interesting. It's happening in a lot of businesses that started in the 70s and 80s, just like in the bike business. It's the same story, that people that started in business, like all these weaving shops, they can't sell their shop or they just closed their shop. So you don't see a lot of new shops opening.
Mm-hmm.
We do have some new dealers and we do see some new business, but by and large, it's shrinking in terms of the number of outlets.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to work at keeping our dealers strong. And on the other hand, because of a shrinking market, what was it, 2 years ago, we started a website selling direct.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I am curious, Jane, because you say we, and obviously this has been we, but what was it like to go from being an editor of a magazine to dating one of its significant advertisers? How did that go from being I'm an editor to I'm part of this team?
Well, I mean, we really did. When I worked at Interweave, we really did try to keep it separate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason, one of the reasons, maybe not the whole reason, but partial reason why I kept my name.
Mm-hmm.
Because would it have been good to be Jane Schacht as the editor of magazine and have Schacht Spindle Company be the advertiser?
Probably would have looked a little.
I don't know. But anyway, there's a story that I was talking to somebody, another advertiser, a loom advertiser, and he was shocked. He did not know that Barry and I were married. It wasn't like I ever kept it a secret from anybody, but he just didn't know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So.
But it must have been kind of fun when you could then go and be as particular, as much a part of the team as you probably felt at that point.
You mean at Schacht?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't really, Barry and his brother had an agreement that they wouldn't have spouses work in the business.
Really?
Yeah. But, we looked all over the country for a sales manager.
Mm-hmm.
We flew people in. And, the one woman we thought we would hire decided not to take the job because she was strolling downtown with one of our staff and she saw a weirdo wearing a paper bag on his head and she went back to...
Well, he didn't have any clothes on.
Oh, I forgot about that part. But in any case, she decided Boulder was a little too advanced for her. So, Jane said, well, I can help. And I asked my brother, it's okay if Jane comes in and helps. And I'd say within a week, Dan comes into my office and he says, I like working with Jane. So that basically fixed it. And raising our daughter, was the second part of that job. But eventually she came to be full time. And then my brother and I divided the businesses and Dan moved business and opened a millwork shop. And he did really well in that. And then at the age of 70, he retired.
And I think one of the things that I find really fun is that this is actually something that you have in common with Louët, is a background in the company's history. There's a connection to millwork and cabinet making, and it's just sort of a funny little connection.
Their kitchen making, yeah, which they have 1 or 2 kitchens scheduled for completion by the beginning of next year, and then they're going to be devoted entirely to the spinning and weaving market.
So we're getting around to the part that I'm sort of bearing the lead here, because this is certainly kind of big news. But there are the differences between Schacht and Louët, to some extent, are obvious at the front. There's a little bit of a aesthetic difference. There's the fact that one is in Boulder and one is in the Netherlands. But underneath that, there are such similarities between the companies that it really kind of makes sense that the future of Schacht is as part of Louët, as a partner to Louët.
Right. Well, I consider it very lucky because we really are at the point in our lives where we needed to sell the business. I hadn't been to a Convergence in years, but when it was in Wichita, I thought I would go. And I'm always upfront and friendly with all the other loom companies in the world. And every loom company in the world has been to visit us in our factory. There are no secrets in woodworking. But I hadn't ever met Paul, and I didn't really know he was a new owner of Louët. We had met his father back in 19 whatever when we bicycled through there. And we talked, we chatted, and then on the Sunday of that show, he comes over and he's standing in front of me and he says, when will you be back in your office? And I said, Monday morning. And he says, I'll see you at 9 o'clock. And I said, oh, well, tell me when you're flying in, I'll pick you up at the airport. He says, I'm renting a car and leaving now. So he came to visit. We had about 3 hours because he had to go catch another flight back to Holland. And it was very friendly. And I think we each saw in each other's eyes a little twinkle. No words really passed about anything else. A week after he gets back to Holland, he sends a little email and says, I want to be your successor. So that was great because that really gave us a sound foundation to continue the business. And knowing that company and their products, I thought, what could be better? It's not only do they know how to make things, but they're ingenious. They know how to create new product, and they obviously know how to manufacture. And 2 weeks ago, Jane and I were in Holland, And we visited the Louët factory, and it was a perfect choice because they're doing exactly what we're doing with similar attitudes towards product, to customer service, to design. They're a little bit more automated than we are, only because their machinery is only a month old, their newest machines. Ours, are quite a few years older, but those same machines are going to be operating here after Paul takes over the running of Schacht as well. Secondly, which I wasn't sure of, but I know now more, Dave Van Stralen, who has been the Louët North American person for many years. He's a software person. He's a marketing person. He has all the skills to add not only to Paul's expertise, but to aid and give guidance to the people we have here. Our daughter and son-in-law will remain partial owners. And Michael has been in the company more than 15 years now. And he's going to be, I hope, happy because his job is going to be refined. And he's taken on lots of burdens, but he's going to have a really good job with really good backup. People who have high technical skills that will make the success of Schacht as great as can possibly be. Into the future, as I can sell the bicycle part of our business, that square footage will be occupied by Louët product for distribution and their new yarn company, the Van Cotton Yarn Company, which is also owned by Paul.
And that was pretty exciting too. I mean, they have a whole variety of, we were talking about pearl cotton, and I actually have a couple little cones ordered to play with for a Little Looms project. We were at H&H, gosh, it seems like yesterday, but it was a couple months ago. And it was right before then that you had let it be known that this deal was in the works.
Right.
And it was very interesting to see people come up to you. And some people were a little bit, dismayed that Barry Schacht was no longer going to be the head of Schacht. And you were pretty matter of fact about it.
So it is with all deities.
Actually, I think what you said was something more like, would you rather that I died? Or, I don't remember exactly what it was, but you were very matter of fact about it.
Yeah. Well, those people who had, any kind of reserve about that, they can really be happier because not only are we going to be able to continue, but with a level of skill that anybody else coming into this business that we just wouldn't have. It's a complicated business. It's a small market, but manufacturing on top or underneath everything else that's made is probably the more complicated thing of business in the world. And because our businesses are so small, we need to know sourcing. We need to know finance. We need to know all of the accounting functions. We need to know marketing. And we have to be able to do that within the confines of a very tiny industry. So here's a company that will be enhancing what we do, at the same time, of course, enhancing themselves.
Right.
And even our competitors benefit from this because it gives strength to an industry. So one of the most important things is to be able to market into a wider area. And to do that, you need more dollars. So there have been many cooperative efforts over the years that usually Interweave, Schacht, Lee Mokra, Straw & Gold, quite a few other companies banded together to make an industry stronger by getting cooperative funding. And that's one of the advantages of this company being bigger. It's not huge, so they're not going to be, crashing anybody else's party, but they're going to be maintaining and building the industry for everybody.
I think that a lot of us have gotten used to the idea that when things are sold, that it's often to, say, a private equity company, it's often to a larger company that maybe doesn't understand or appreciate. And so when people think, oh, Schacht is being bought out, that's the pattern. They don't think about Schacht is being bought out by, its counterpart, really.
Yeah. Unfortunately, if one looks at this as just a financial thing, It isn't in anybody's eyes. Yes, it makes a good living for some of the people in the industry, but it really is a dedicated business that has a lot of heart in it. No matter who the person is, it's got to, because it is minuscule. There are other things that people could do. I couldn't because, I'm undisciplined, and having the environment that I work in being so small, I can be disciplined within it, but I could never really work successfully for another company because I'm not a gun for hire. Some people have skills and they can do very well in all kinds of environments. It just isn't my personality. So I've been very lucky to be able to develop something in an area that I can grasp, that doesn't stretch my skills.
And as a small business, Long Thread Meat is a small business, and I'm certainly not looking to go anywhere for a while. But that's something I think about, is what will become of this company that I love, that I've worked so hard on. Whose hands will it wind up in? Can I trust the folks who will come after me? So having there be somebody who has a track record that
right?
What?
Yeah, it's just superb. Just absolutely. It lets us sleep at least half of the night.
Well, I'm excited to have another yarn source too. So
right.
In the Vene yarn. So,
well, I think long term too, you have to look at it. It could help both companies both ways for distribution of. We don't have that much distribution in Europe because it's hard to send stuff over there, and it's like individual shops it's going to. So if there was actually a point of distribution, I think Schacht sales would strengthen in Europe. And likewise with Louët, if they didn't have to ship every single order via UPS and have a warehouse, they could have more product over here and ship it quicker.
So this is very exciting, and we've kind of been following it in news releases and things like that. But what are you going to do to celebrate?
Well, we're going to celebrate many things on October 4th. So we're going to kick off Spinning and Weaving Week. We're going to have an all-day festival. It's on a Saturday. So we're going to have vendors and food trucks and a contest, spinning contest. We're having a back to front, front to back warping throwdown and try it area where people can try our products. And Louët has been storing their products from H&H in our barn. So Paul is going to be here, and I think Dave Van Stralen is going to be here, so people can come meet them. So we're going to celebrate kind of Jane and Barry retiring, welcome Louët, and we hope a lot of people come. I just heard that we have almost 100 people that have already signed up to come, so people can just sign up on the website. There's no cost. And you can also get a wheel tune-up that day, so you can sign up for that.
I bet you could get your Schacht or your Louët wheel tuned up that day.
Well, we're just doing Schacht wheels because Cindy Lair, who used to work here many years, is coming back to do the wheel tune-ups.
That's very special. Cindy was here for decades.
30-some years. Yeah.
Yeah, and while Jane and I are playing around riding our bicycles through France, she's been coming and helping out 3-4 hours a day. Because we have some new staff in the office, so she's been great to handle the customer service.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. Well, this is really exciting. So not too long, get to come and have a party.
Yeah. I love parties.
You promised that we could talk about names. So I'm going to give you a quiz.
Oh.
Where does the Arras tapestry loom name come from?
Well, people know the Gobelin name, of course, very well. And I thought, France is famous for tapestry weaving, as, most European countries have been. And, so is North America. Tapestry weaving is the Native American weaving. But I thought I wanted it to relate to France. So I started looking around, and I came across the city outside of Paris called Arras. And it's got a good tone. It's got some music to it. Right. So that's where that name came from.
It was a tapestry weaving center.
Okay, how about the cricket? Which is just fun to say, cricket.
I think that was my name because I designed
Ladybugs, crickets.
I designed the cute products.
Mm-hmm.
So when we designed the Cricut loom, we really designed it for kids, and I thought it needed to have a kid name.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it came from.
What's interesting, when we were looking to name the four-harness adaptation, the quartet, actually a bunch of Cricuts together is a quartet.
Oh, cool.
Definition.
So
And that came from our accounting manager, Nate.
wow, great ideas from everywhere.
Yeah.
Now the Flatiron I can guess because being in Boulder, you're right near the Flatiron Mountains.
And it has some of the pun and the other relationships. It builds from something flat, like, the ocean floor was Boulder, Colorado. And our distinctive geographic feature is the Flatirons, and they fold up from a flat environment of the ocean
right.
into the Flatirons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a local point.
Right.
So that was great.
Yeah.
The baby wolf.
Yes. Tell me about all the wolves.
Well, this is another one of those products I'm designing. And by the time we got done with the elements of it, I said, God, this is a great little loom. This loom is terrific. What do we call it? And I'm thinking, it's so good. It has all the features of a big loom. It's ferocious, but it's not, a ferocious animal. It's small. How about baby wolf? It hit. It was great. We were shipping them all over the world, and we used to send postcards out to dealers because we were so slow in getting them out. We would put a postcard with pictures of sheep, our logo, with a little baby wolf in the front of it. And we'd say, your baby wolves will be arriving in 2 to 6 weeks. And there was a postman in Connecticut in sheep country that saw that. And he started telling all the neighbors for one of our dealers, this woman is bringing baby wolves in.
Oh my gosh.
And the neighbors got all excited. But in any case, it was a great name. And then I thought, now we're going to make a bigger loom.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the next loom, the 36-inch. And I said, I have some friends, they're punsters, they know, language, poets, etc. Let's have them come to a party. And I presented the idea, I want a name for that. And at the end of the evening, I remember sitting on my steps being discouraged, saying, everybody's gone. Not a good name among them. And I said, well, it's obvious. This is the next version. It's called the Mighty Wolf. So I came up with that name myself because the punsters missed it. And then, of course, when we went back down in size, what would be obvious but wolf pup.
So in between the baby and the mighty. Yeah.
Well, smaller than
The baby.
Oh.
Yeah. So that whole series of looms, was named pretty easy because of the first name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Trying to think, are there other products that are interesting names that you know?
Well, the flip is pretty clear because you can fold it up.
Yes, and flip is two things. One of our employees that was working on that, he was one of our earlier CNC programming guys.
Mm-hmm.
His name was Philip. And growing up, I knew a guy that was Philip, but his short name was Flip.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I thought, oh, okay, loom flips, open, flips, closed.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would give Philip the kind of the kudo for having his name attached to that product.
Nice. So that's very individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I bet there are other little things out there. Oh, the incredible rope machine. We go way back in our history. It's like, I just thought it was such a unique idea. Even though it'd been around for thousands of years, we called it the Incredible Rope Machine, and it was also another one of our successful names.
Mm-hmm. Well, that does tell you what it is.
Yeah. And people would always look at the ropes being made and say, oh, that's how it's done. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you pick up from, the environment and from how people react to different things.
Yeah. Well, Barry and Jane, thanks so much for sitting down with me. I really appreciate your time, and looking forward to seeing you in October.
Yeah. Well, thanks. This has been fun, Ann.
Thanks to our sponsors for supporting the podcast. Thank you for listening to the Long Thread Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please rate the show and leave us a comment on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Thanks again.